So I want to introduce Anup. Anup is a member of 7 CTOs, an unbelievably enthusiastic, intelligent dude. I wanted to just say that tonight I want you to walk away with thinking about self-sovereign identities. Have you ever been tired of making up a new password managers? Who was locked out of their 1Password 6 to 7 upgrade this week? Sucked. I suddenly had no access to any of my passwords. I don't know if I should say that. And then, who is tired of thinking that their data is sort of being ingested by this another service that you're signing up for? So self-sovereign identities has the promise of sort of addressing all these issues. So I want to introduce Anup Marwadi. He is the CTO of TicketSocket. He's the CEO of Hypertrends. He's got vast experience in the blockchain space. And Anup Marwadi, please give him a big hand as he comes forward.
Thank you, thank you. Man, how do I keep up with that? How do I follow up with that? I thought they called me Anup Dog. Anyways, what a venue. Please give it a big hand to Etienne and Michael and the 7 CTOs team. This is just amazing. I come here with my daughter every Sunday, and today she told me, "Daddy, you're cheating on me." And I was like, "No, Sophia, Daddy has to make a very, very important presentation." And she looked at me very closely to see if I was lying. And when she realized I wasn't, she said, "Okay, 1 ice cream, and you're good to go." So with that, I'm here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Anup Marwadi. I am a CEO of Hypertrends Global Inc. We build some amazing software, and recently we have kind of started dabbling into blockchain, and we're building some nice products that will actually make, our focus is to have blockchain have mass adoption. So a lot of our products that we're building are focused in that. With that said, this is the most important topic that we should be talking about right now. Because as we transcend from the Web 2.0, which is the centralized framework, onto Web 3.0, which is considered as a decentralized framework, the identity is completely going to change. The paradigm of an identity is going to completely change. And this concept is going to become more and more prevalent in your lives. So it is very important. As a takeaway, I would love it if you guys were to download some of these apps that offer identity solutions and play around with them. So let's start with that. If I were to ask you, what does identity mean to you? What would you say? Any thoughts? Let me give you a hint. It actually depends on the context in which you're talking about an identity. So for example, for a hospital, it might be your electronic healthcare record. For the SEC, it may be your KYC information so that they make sure that you're not doing any money laundering. So what I'm trying to say is that every individual, you as an individual, have certain attributes that have been over time verified and codified or attested, as they call it, by authorities in the real world who are reputable. And these authorities make sure that they give you documentation that verifies or validates certain parts about your identity. Here are some of the attributes that we can talk about: your citizenship, your age via a driver's license, your bank account, your patient ID in a hospital system, or your passport. One or more of these attestations will actually let you transact in the real world. For example, your citizenship and your passport will allow you to get into a country of your choice, provided certain rules are met. Here's the best thing about these physical proofs that you have. You can literally carry them around in your wallet. I can literally walk up to a bar and present my ID to someone, the doorman, and he can validate that I'm 21 and he can let me in the bar. This is great if you're doing validation in the real world. It's very easy to validate your identity. In the digital world, no one can differentiate between you and a dog. There's a big classic icon, a cartoon that was made where a dog is playing with the computer and says, No one knows that you're a dog on the internet. So because this problem of verifying someone's identity was so challenging, companies like Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, they literally developed systems to help us navigate this important problem. They gave us tools and technologies that we used to connect with hundreds and thousands of sites across the internet. And as a result, they started collecting data on us. And they started collecting more and more data as we used their products more and more, and they built identity profiles on us. And I actually am the first person to admit that some of my most sensitive data belongs to Facebook right now. And when data like that goes into wrong hands, we all know what can happen. 2 words, 2016 election. To add insult to the injury, these guys make about $106 billion in ad revenues using your data. Not a single dollar has been passed on to you. And the problem is actually worse. We have zero control over this data. We do not know who is accessing our data. We do not know when they're accessing our data. We do not know what they are doing with our data. We do not know how long they've had our data, and it's actually causing major problems. The centralized identity has other problems. There are 1.1 billion people in the world that cannot prove their identity because they lack necessary documentation. These could be refugees. These could be people who are fighting famines or wars, and they have gotten away, and they have no way to prove their identity. Or these are humans who are being trafficked. There is no way for them to prove their identity. The system is completely inefficient. How many people here actually know on how many sites their date of birth or their driver's license information has been duplicated? I can tell you for a fact that you won't even know the count. It's probably more than 10, probably more than 15. The problem is that we're doing this and we're replicating our most critical data in so many different systems that we have no idea how to control that anymore. And because of that, you see things like Verizon, Target, TJ Maxx, Uber, Equifax, all these guys get hacked, and the consumers like us end up paying to the tune of about $16 billion in losses. 2 billion accounts were hacked in 2016 alone. This is an enormous problem that needs to be solved. And this problem is actually only getting worse. We are introducing hundreds of thousands of devices on the internet. These devices are literally taking decisions on your behalf. Did we not read about Alexa, where she recorded an entire conversation of a family and without their consent sent it out to some other third-party individual? That's a tremendous problem. There are no rules that actually govern. There is no legal implication for making mistakes like that. Some of your most private data is being given out and you have no control. So as we add more and more devices, this problem is only going to get worse. That's what makes me think that it's really time to rethink our identity. So let's speculate on what this system would look like. Let's just talk about a scenario where you are an investor and you want to invest in a startup. That's what we all want. We want someone's money so that we can build our businesses. So let's say there is a particular startup that you really like. And you say, hey, I want to invest some money in you. Well, the startup knows that they can't just take money from any random person. This person has to be a accredited investor. And not just that, you want to make sure that you have their KYC, know your customer information, so that you're not canned for anti-money laundering laws. So the startup is going to say, yes, sure, please share your KYC information. Now at this point, you have a couple of options. One of the option is that you actually send your paperwork to this startup directly, which a lot of people are currently doing, which is obviously very dangerous because who knows what's going on with that paperwork after your information is processed. Or the other is to find a trusted verifier who you can securely send this information to, who can review all your information and give you a set of attestations that actually validate your identity. And then you can, as a person, store this information on your phone or a secure device where only you have access to it, and then reuse this information and pass it on to any individual or organization or an entity who wishes to verify your KYC. This problem is easily solved using a central verifier. This problem is scaled massively on the blockchain, but the biggest problem on the blockchain is there is no trust. You cannot trust the other person is going to validate your identity correctly. And it is on that very premise that a new identity system framework is being laid down by some of the most key players, and some of the guiding principles for that are out here. So this identity system obviously has to be decentralized. We have learned that we cannot trust a single corporation, individual entity for management of our identity. It also has to be self-sovereign, which means you as an individual are only in control of your own identity. It has to be secure using cryptography. It has to be portable, which means if you don't like a given provider that you're working with, you can move on. You can move it to the next provider. It has to be discoverable. This is very important. There has to be a way for people to know that if they want to request a certain set of credentials from you, then they should be able to find you easily. It has to be permissioned. This is extremely important because only you should decide what information you're going to share, for how long you're going to share, and who you want to share it with. It works on a very important concept called zero-knowledge proofs. Now, why is this concept so important? Remember that example that I told you about walking into a bar? Well, right now, you can walk into a bar, and when you hand out your driver's license, the person can see your name, your date of birth. If the person's really kind of crazy, they can see your address and they can stalk you. Well, that's not good. The only proof that you need to provide to this person is that you're above the age of 21. What if there was a way that you could do that without divulging the rest of your identity? Well, that's the premise of zero-knowledge proofs, and this is going to form a very important concept in the digital identity world. The next thing that is so important is it has to be open protocol-based. Now, this is very important. Imagine if email wasn't open protocol. Email is based on a protocol called SMTP. Imagine if that wasn't open. We would literally all be using Hotmail, Yahoo. Is anyone still using those, by the way? No. Okay, good. We would still be using those, and we would have never moved on to better systems like Gmail because there is no competition. So to make it open and protocol-based, you are inviting competition and you're inviting people to build better products. And by making it portable, you can move. It has to be simple, extensible. These are pretty common things. It has to work for people and things. And then there's another concept called guardianship. This is very important. There's a whole bunch of people right now that are unable to make decisions on their own, whether it be kids or whether it be mentally or physically challenged people. We need to have some sort of a protocol by which I, as a person, can give rights to someone else to give guardianship and have them take decisions on my behalf. This is a very important thing in the digital world. If everything is moving digital, we better make sure that no one gets left behind, and this identity has to work for everyone. And the great thing is all of this can be facilitated by the blockchain technology. So if you really look at our journey from where we have come from and where we are going, it's so amazing. We started in the late 90s by a centralized identity with the internet boom, where people had multiple accounts. And around 2006, Facebook, Twitter, and all these guys started doing federated identities. Microsoft has their own version of it. And then, a lot of providers are coming on right now. But as we're slowly inching towards the decentralized web, you're noticing this concept of user-centric identity become more and more important. And I think what that's going to do is open up some amazing possibilities for business owners, because there is so many things. Sorry, yes? Yeah, so correct. But there are still, you need to have certain named providers that can only distribute. Let me answer that in a little bit. Let me show you what some of the things you can do there, and I will definitely get back to you on that. So one of the things that you can do is this enables a whole bunch of other things like, it opens up to opportunities where you can actually decide who you want to share your information with, how you want to share them, and how long you want to share this information. And it opens up like a whole bunch of different revenue models that we're going to talk about. And this will eventually lead everyone into a self-sovereign identity system. So we know that this is a problem that is not just solved by a single individual or a corporation. So because of that, the Digital Identity Foundation was created. And one of the core tenets was to bring some of the biggest thought leaders in the industry. Microsoft, IDEO for great user experiences, Evernym, Sovereign, Uport, Civic, all of these guys are a part of what is called as a Digital Identity Foundation. And they're going to place all the recommendations on what are the core things that you need to develop if you're building a core identity. So some of the core focus areas for the DIF are unique global identification. You should be able to have one identifier or a unique identifier, I should say, for your identity. And then you should be able to move that anywhere across any network, across any environment. And then, what are the guidelines for that? So those are being put on as a focus area. How do you discover this information? That's another topic of research. So there's talk about that. There is storage and compute requirements. Because your information now is at the edge or, on your phone or devices as such, which are not on the network, we need to talk about how this information is going to be persisted. And not only that, when it comes to time, you need to have this information readily available so that you can prove your identity. So a lot of computing requirements are, again, on that focus area. There's the reputation and attestations. These, like I said, form the backbone of the decentralized applications, if you will. So the more attestations you have about a certain thing, the more your reputation is going to be. And how that is architected or how that is structured is also a core focus area. And finally, what are the various use cases that you have to deal with? How does someone decide how the user experience should be, and what are the recommended guidelines for backup or recovery and all those things? So those are the things that also are going to be a core focus area. So we're going to look at three solutions here. One of them is Sovereign, one of them is Uport, and one of them is Civic. Sovereign is a permissioned ledger, and this is its way of accomplishing scale for millions of devices. So there is a central layer that does all the transaction, and then around it is another ring for an open layer where people can read information about you. Sovereign is extremely open and has a very high emphasis on portability, but it also has its own blockchain. And a product called Evernym is based on the Sovereign protocol. And one of the cool things about Sovereign is that it has what is called as a pseudonymous identity, which means if someone is asking for your phone number, you don't need to give them your phone number. You can give them a unique identifier, and that's the only way that they'll be able to call you. And if your phone number has to change, you don't have to do a thing. You just decouple your phone from that identifier and you tack on a new identifier and you're good to go. Uport is based on Ethereum, and Ethereum is a very popular blockchain. It works with JOT tokens, which are very common in the industry. It also has an open protocol for claims and identity, and it also based on an open source platform. It also supports private chains for fast transactions and scalability. For example, you can use AWS Lambda or Azure Functions or something like that to accomplish scale. And finally, we're going to talk about Civic. Now, Civic is a really interesting case. I think amongst all of these providers that you've seen, Civic has gained the best amount of traction and has proved without doubt that execution really can bring a change. Civic has, instead of just focusing on being academic or professorial, what they've done is they've actually built solutions. And they've commercialized a lot of their products. There is a product called ID Codes. There is a product that monitors your identity for theft. There's a KYC-enabled product. And they also have what is called as a Civic token, which allows all the parties in the ecosystem, the person whose identity needs to be verified, the person who's requesting the identity, and the person whose identity, the person who can validate or verify your identity. It brings them all on one platform. And using the CVC token, these guys can transact, and then you can get your identities attested. So I was looking for some really cool case studies so that I can kind of put this in presence of everyone and people can really understand this. And what better to do it than beer? So when I was a kid, back in school doing my master's, I would always think about ideas, and one of my ideas was, hey man, I have this great idea. What if we could create a beer, alcohol, liquor dispensing machine? And they would all laugh at me. They would be like, no, man, you can't do that in the US. This is not India. And I was like, oh, okay. You got to get your identities validated. And I was like, oh, okay, there goes the idea. So Civic has done this recently. It got big PR. So essentially what you do is I downloaded the Civic app and I was able to scan my driver's license. And once that was scanned, because I need to prove that is my driver's license, I also had to do a real-time face scan and then send both of these information to the network on the blockchain where someone could actually validate your identity and give you attestations. As you can see, the first time around, there were a bunch of invalid attestations. I believe it's probably because of the light on my license. So I had to do that all over again. And the second time around, as you can see, all of my attestations came out right. My date of birth, my license issue days, and all these things were completely perfect. And as soon as I said, yes, it's accurate, all of that is now stored on my device and is encrypted with my private keys and is available for me. All I now need to do is walk to the beer machine and scan their QR code, and it will send me a consent to access just my age attestation, nothing else. And I can say yes, so I can scan, consent, and I can buy cold brew using crypto. How cool is that? So this was really amazing, and I really tried this. And I tried, and I set everything up in a matter of 2 minutes. And Civic had actually put out an ad that said, hey, if you don't want to stand in line, do it in your hotel, get yourself validated, and then this takes less than 20 seconds to 30 seconds to get it done. So this is pretty amazing. For a beer lover, this changes everything. I think this is just amazing. And where do we go from here? So the market is for the taking, guys. There's a lot of new cool things that we can do. There's going to be new marketplaces that are going to emerge. There's going to be this concept of identity hubs. So if you're a music lover, for example, you can store your music profile on a music identity hub. If you're a sports lover, there will be a sports identity hub, and you can obviously move from one to the other if you want. The hardware is completely going to change. What if you could actually have a Fitbit band like what I'm wearing right now with your identity encrypted, and you could just walk around with that to prove certain things or to transact in a safe and secure manner? So that's something that's coming. Not just that, how do you store your information safely at the edge? Well, there are tools that are being developed. New hardware is being developed as we speak. And then the whole e-commerce landscape is going to change. We've seen this in Europe and in Asia. There are leaps and bounds ahead of us in blockchain technology adaptation. People are transacting in ways that were just unthought of. There's a new video streaming platform called eTube or something like that, where you can watch videos and people who've uploaded videos can get money. There's no middleman. All of the data gets stored on a centralized or a decentralized file system called IPFS. So there's a lot of things that are going on in this industry that are just going to completely revolutionize. And this is almost in my head like the Hollywood movies. They were 10 years ahead of us. All of these things were shown to us in the movies. And it's amazing. What I've been seeing is that Hollywood has always been 10 years ahead of us. So I would like to end this with a very special note from Hollywood. And I looked at no other than Elastigirl on Incredibles. And she said, your identity is your most valuable possession. Better guard it right. Thank you.